for Thursday, September 17th, 2020. I'm Erik Clancy. I'm joined by Patrick Kelley, and we're talking all the news in the pro wrestling world. I think we'll start off, since this is a Thursday. We are one day removed from the Wednesday Night Wars last night. We had AEW and NXT. Patrick, what did you think of the shows?
Well, I haven't had a chance to watch NXT yet. I thought last night's Dynamite was one of their better overall shows, just from start to finish. I liked just about everything that they did. Right off the bat, starting off with the Bucks super kicking the referee and kind of imposing their will. And that gives them a level of unpredictability that it's like, oh, geez, are they going to come back later in the show? They didn't, but starting off with something like that kind of set the tone for what I thought was an overall very exciting night.
Yeah, no, I had a similar I had similar thoughts on that. And I got in a conversation with somebody and they were saying, I was like, oh, this has been a great show. And he's like, well, maybe from a work rate standpoint, but storyline wise, what's happened? I'm like, what show are you watching? You had the Young Bucks continue their descent into like evil. You had Kenny basically snub Hangman again, and Hangman going back into singles wrestling. You had somebody attack Matt Hardy. We don't know who. You had that whole like Archer teaming up with Team Taz, and then you had the stuff at the end. So I'm like, there was because I appreciate good work. I love the G-1 and stuff, but like I'm not beholden to it. And I'm like, that show was like pretty stock full of like storyline advancement. I thought it was great. I actually, maybe we can start there. I thought the main event was I thought that was the best Dynamite main event they've ever had. I thought it was one of the best matches of the year. I thought it was fantastic.
It came off beautifully, and it really reminded me of like the old parking lot brawls that we used to get in the Attitude Era. You think of Rock and Mankind, with Rock giving Foley the rock bottom on the roof of the car, and things like that. I remember Ken Shamrock and Steve Blackman had a couple of matches like that, and there was for lack of a better word, there was a rawness and a grittiness to it that came across really well. It's one of the best violent matches I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. I agree. And I don't mean to I know what you're saying, and I don't mean to romanticize the Attitude Era, because, as I've gone back and watched it, I mean, I think it's still great, especially at the top of the card, but there's a lot of like hardcore crap in there.
Oh, sure.
And I don't want, but I mean, there's good stuff too. And obviously, but I don't want that to take away from the fact that I thought this was just really well done pro wrestling. I mean, this is a feud. And I wasn't even really into the feud. I thought it was fine, but like whatever. But this is a feud that's been built up for like probably a month or so, and like this was the payoff to it, and it was just like the whole fight felt real, like as real as a pro wrestling fight feels,
Right.
It felt real. It felt there was aggression, there was violence, there was storyline payoffs to everything. And
they didn't do any cinematic stuff to it too, which I thought helped.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. And apparently this was filmed in it was filmed in one take, so that is impressive that they got all that through there, But yes, there wasn't a lot of cinematic stuff. But I thought the spots were like cool and painful, and like I was just interested in the match more than I am most matches, and the finish was great. The Orange Cassidy coming out, which a lot of people are like, Proud and Powerful shouldn't lose so much, and they probably shouldn't, but like they didn't lose clean. Orange Cassidy came out of the trunk, which was a great spot, and then of course the final scene of the night, which was just like pitch perfect pro wrestling. Sue coming up in the van, them all getting in the van, her stopping and flipping off Proud and Powerful. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the whole thing was so well done, and it had comedy, but it was like, it wasn't WWE comedy where it's like so forced. It was just like, it was funny. So I enjoyed the entire thing. Like I said, one of the best matches they've ever done on TV, their best main event. I thought it was great. And I mean, is it just me, or is Santana like totally a future main eventer singles guy?
I don't know if I've ever had that impression of him, but he's come a long way from where he was when I was watching him in TNA, where they were part of the not good version of LAX. As you know, when we think of LAX, we think of Homicide and Hernandez, and then these two came along and kind of took over that gimmick, and we were kind of like, they're not as good as the other ones. And then you look at them now, especially Santana. It's like there's something there with these guys. They really captured like a it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Gorillas of Destiny, kind of like these roughneck tough guys that just beat the shit out of people. And it's like, I'm kind of digging this. I loved every minute of this, and it didn't overstay its welcome either. It was the perfect length for everything that they tried to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I like him because I mean he's a big, tall guy. He's a good promo. And you know he comes off like he can actually kick your ass. I mean it's one of the things I like about Eddie Kingston so much. Like he comes off as tough, and you know I'm not trying to be like Bill Watts or anything, but I think that adds something to it. But yeah, no, I thought this show was great. We started off. I thought Jurassic Express have been, for lack of a better term, like the opening match superstars, like for the past like 3 weeks, including All Out. Where I know they weren't. They had the tooth and nail match before, but really they were the opening match. I thought that was a great opener with the Young Bucks. Last week they did great, and actually I don't know if they were the opener last week, but they've done so many good openers lately, and I thought this was another great one with FTR. FTR got to be like shitbag heels, and like there were so many times where I'm like, is this going to end in a draw? Because they're like, you know, you don't want FTR to lose, but you maybe don't want to beat Jurassic Express. But I like the way they did it. I thought it was a good match. I thought it was smart. Yeah, I thought it was a great opener.
Very good. And actually, I don't know if you watch AEW Dark, but they had a draw on this week's episode of AEW Dark.
Oh my God. Was it Avalon and Cutler?
Yes, it was.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I'm kind of digging that storyline where it's like the two guys that suck and are just trying to get a win, and they finally face each other. So it's like, all right, somebody's got to get their first win, and it ends in a draw, which I think
the mega powers explode. Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. All right, what do we have next? We had Kazarian and Hangman, which I thought was really good.
I loved it. It was a great reintroduction for Hangman as a single star because he's been in the tag team with Omega for most of the year, and this match served as a great reminder. It's like, oh yeah, he can go as a singles guy too. So
yeah, I mean he was in the first title match against Jericho. You know, a lot of people were worried initially. I wasn't because I've loved his New Japan work, but I guess in retrospect, I can see where people were worried. They were worried he was going to be a Roman Reigns type where they just anoint him, shove him down your throats. But actually what they've done with Hangman, as we've all seen with the anxious millennial cowboy character, has been brilliant. And like, I would honestly say he's probably, maybe with the exception of Cody, the most popular member of the Elite right now.
Oh yeah. And some nights part of me feels like he's probably my favorite one to watch out of those guys. He's just so energetic, and there's something about him. And, you know, we go back to that first title match where they decided to go with Jericho. And I think at the time, a lot of people were like, oh, they went with the safe option to go with Jericho, but it paid off in the long run because it allowed Hangman to get over organically. So when he does eventually win the title, it'll feel like a big deal now.
Well, yeah. And it worked out for everybody, right? Like putting the title on Jericho, like, turned out to be genius, and it turned out to really like make a lot of sense. You know, and Hangman losing gave him the character development that even if he had won, he's probably more over now than if he were to win the titles. At that point. So, you know, it's stuff like that where you like where you are on the fictional card doesn't always translate to where you are in reality. Like I think a great example is when Hall and Nash went from, excuse me, when they went from WWE to WCW. I mean, now Nash had been the world champion in WWF, and, you know, Hall had been a big star, and Nash didn't win the title for like a few years, but Nash and Hall, the second they got into WCW, were bigger stars than they had been in the WWF.
Yep. Absolutely.
So like just because you're not champion doesn't necessarily mean you're not a big star. Like you go back and you look at all these guys, like you know, Jericho was never really the top guy in WWE, but he was in an era where viewership was so high and people were so over that he's considered such a big star today just because, of where he was. It doesn't necessarily mean you had to be the champion or the face of the company or whatever. Your stock can grow or fall depending on, how you make things work. All right, so that match was good. Omega kind of shunned him. MJF just beat the shit out of a jobber in like 3 seconds. I thought this was exactly what it needed to be. I thought, I think MJF should have had some squash matches previously, but I think it's fine right now. You've got to just show him killing people. And I've always said this, like, Ric Flair can like cheat against Sting and be competitive and stuff, but like, you don't need like George South to be competitive against Ric Flair. That's ridiculous.
Right.
It's like when Kenny Omega wrestled Alan Angels and like it was competitive, and it's like, why are you doing that? You're Kenny Omega. This is Alan Angels. Like, are we saying that like there's the gap is that small? So like MJF, if he's a top guy, he should be crushing dudes like that. Like Tom Brady. I mean, maybe after this week, who knows? But Tom Brady is like, he's a lot better than the third stringer on the Detroit Lions. So I like the fact that you show one of your top stars just killing a guy, because you need to show that there's a difference between your top stars and the very bottom of the card.
Absolutely, and that's something that AEW kind of struggled with, especially with those guys like Omega and the Bucks. But to see something like this, we need those reinforcements of who the stars are. So I like stuff like this. And I got to say, his post-match promo where he talked about putting his own group together in a wolf pack, immediately my mind went to some hopeful thinking. I'm like, oh, are they going to bring in the Dynasty? Because I'd kind of love that if they did.
You're talking like Richard Holiday and
Alex Hammerstone, yeah.
I like Hammerstone. I think he's really good. Holiday, I've seen them all live in MLW, in Melrose Ballroom. I've always liked MJF. I saw MJF for the first time, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. And I was like, oh, this kid's really good. And of course he's turned into like a superstar, but, yeah, I mean, that could be cool. I think MJF would be, it would behoove him to have a faction. It could get some more mileage out of the Wardlow thing, because my initial gut is they're going to do it at Full Gear. And I think that might be a bit too soon. I think like Revolution or Double or Nothing could be a better thing. But yeah, they could get a lot more mileage that way.
Oh, yeah, and Richard Holiday, he did a bit in MLW, like right before the Dynasty split up, or right before MJF left the group, where he would refer to his father as his lawyer / his father. And that is just super funny to me. So to see that on AEW, I would kind of love it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right, then we had Eddie Kingston's group beat up a bunch of touristy looking jobbers, which was I thought it was a fun beatdown. And then it wanted Blade to get his house in order, which of course I think refers to Allie, and getting Allie back as the bunny. And this is one thing that AEW doesn't do this too much, but like, why the hell did Allie leave Butcher and the Blade and just start hanging out with QT Marshall for no reason? Was it ever explained on Dark?
No, it never was. It just kind of happened. They just showed her in the crowd like flirting with QT, and then they just kind of went in that direction. And I was disappointed because I thought she added to the look of the Butcher and the Blade, and I thought it was a nice little group there. So if they're gonna like kind of backtrack and at least explain it or try to make it into something, I think that's going to be beneficial all around. Yeah, personally, I would like to see her back with Butcher and the Blade, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see her back as the bunny. Do you remember the first time they debuted and JR was like, who are they? And then Alex Keller was like, it's the Butcher and the Blade and the bunny. And JR was like, yeah, but who are they? And he's like, it's the Butcher and the Blade.
Why did he hit the Undertaker with the chair? I don't get it.
Yeah. Okay, so Patrick and I have this long running thing. We've had this show. I know this is the second YouTube episode, but we've had this show in one form or another for 14 years. And Patrick and I think it's fucking hilarious that for some reason, JR did not understand the storyline at SummerSlam 1997. So for those of you who don't know, Bret Hart wrestles The Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels is the guest referee. And the idea is that he is Bret Hart's hated nemesis, and he's going to favor The Undertaker, but he can't because if he does that, if he interferes in any way against Bret Hart, he can never wrestle in the United States again. So Bret Hart spits at Shawn Michaels during the match, and then Michaels goes to hit him with a chair. Bret ducks, he hits the Undertaker, and Shawn counts him out, and Bret wins the title. Now for the next like until Bad Blood, maybe even after, JR just constantly says, why did he hit him with a chair? I just don't get it. And then later on, he's like, we still don't know why Shawn Michaels hit him with a chair. And it like wasn't a storyline that like they weren't building up the reason it happened. It was an accident. And then it just like led into Shawn's heel turn. But JR was convinced there was a reason and like would openly ask Vince McMahon on air, why did he do it? And Vince would go, well, I would say he was trying to hit Bret Hart. He's like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Like during pay-per-views, he would say this. And why was he so fucking stupid about that?
I don't know. This may have been, and I'm just speculating here, it may have been a creative disagreement between Jim Ross and Vince or somebody else where JR maybe felt that there needed to be more of a reason for Shawn to do what he did, whereas in this case, and again, I'm just speculating, I would actually side with Vince. It's like, no, it was an accident is enough, I think.
Yeah, I would side with Vince. I can't believe I'm saying that, but like he did something bad and then he just leaned into it and like let the like asshole that had been like percolating there anyway come out. Like that's the story, you know. like I think it's more compelling that way. I think if he does it on purpose, it gives him agency. And I think there's a difference in the fact that like this is happening to him and he's reacting to it. I think that's more interesting personally, but
right.
Yeah. Okay, back to AEW. So we had Private Party against Jericho and Hager, and I thought this was by far Private Party's best match that I've seen in AEW.
It's up there. They had a pretty good one with FTR a while back, but and you and I have talked about it. Private Party, they started off strong with those matches against the Bucks, but ever since then they've just never really evolved or gotten any better. And to see them have a match like this, and granted, you're working with Jericho, who's a seasoned veteran, but they held their own and they did quite well. So yeah, I thought this was a very enjoyable match.
Yeah, so I would disagree with you. I will not say that they started off strong and then went down. I will say that they didn't start strong and they've just been in the same spot they've been. Like they were booked strong. They were booked to beat the Bucks, which I mean, you know, we can debate that decision all day, but like I think they've always kind of been the same tag team. And I would say up until now this could change, they could get better, but up until now, I think they've been one of the few new acts that AEW has whiffed on. And I'm not saying they're a lost cause or anything, but I'm saying like AEW has a pretty good track record for making people into stars. I mean, if you look at Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara and Jungle Boy and there's more. I can't think of them right now, but there's more. MJF.
Well, Butcher and the Blade.
Yeah, MJF, Butcher and the Blade. Like the Dark Order has turned out really well, actually.
They felt like a lost cause initially, and now they're pretty well.
Yeah, and AEW like has a great record with this, but so far, Private Party for a team that got to beat the Young Bucks, I'm like, yeah, you know, and I hope they improve. And I thought the post match angle with I think it was Quinn was hitting Jericho, who I think Mark Quinn is like much better than Isaiah Cassidy. Mm-hmm. I thought that was kind of cool. I like the idea of Jericho and Hager kind of like as a team. I think they're interesting, and I like the idea that they're just like cutting through the tag ranks. They're like, we're gonna get tag title shots, and they're just like beating people up, and they're like beating teams in the rankings. And I'm like, hey, this feels like a fictional sports league, which is weird because it's been a very long time since something has felt to me. Pro wrestling has felt to me like it's a fictional sports league. It mostly seems like it's disconnected, weird SNL skits where the same people just show up in slightly different roles with no connection to what they did last week.
Well, one of our criticisms of the WWE for years and years now has been getting a title shot is the easiest thing in the world to do, because all you have to do is be mad at somebody. Just be mad at somebody and you'll get a title shot.
Yeah, you can just call them out.
Yeah, pretty much. So there's never that sense that they earn those, or very rarely there's that sense that they earn those title shots. Not saying that that's all the time. It's just generally, especially lower tier titles. But here it's like you get a tag title shot in AEW, it actually feels like a big deal because chances are you had to win a bunch of matches to get to that point.
Yeah, I would love if on a WWE show they just like had somebody come out and call out a champion, and then the champion was like, "I'm not coming out. That guy hasn't won enough matches."
Well, they did this weird thing for a long time, and I remember when Punk was kind of feuding with Cena when Punk was the champion, and all these veterans would be like, "You need to give John Cena a title match." It's like, why? He's beat him like 3 times. He doesn't have to give him shit.
He beat him. He beat him at SummerSlam. He Cena couldn't beat him at the Raw 1000. They drew at the one thing. Yeah, they kept making him fight him again. Then he won the triple threat at like Survivor Series. Like, yeah, they're like, you gotta do it one more time. I'm like, it doesn't work that you just keep letting him fight him until Cena wins. That's not fair.
Infinite do-overs.
Yeah, I like Mick Foley being like people don't care about title reigns, they care about moments. I'm like, well, you would say that. You held the title for like 3 seconds.
3 times though. 3 times.
Yeah.
Those 9-second reigns were great.
And that's the thing. Like I remember that. I'm like, he never felt like Mick Foley's great. He was a huge star for the business, but like as a world champion, he never felt like a world champion because you had like 2 weeks to adjust to him being champion. Then he was like not champion anymore. So it was always like, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that occurred, but even The Rock, I mean, forever, like The Rock, like, I mean, but that was the Attitude Era. Remember, like that was yeah. They hot shotted that thing around. It was like terrible, actually. And like,
Triple H held it 4 times in his first, from his first title win to his 4th one. That all took place within a year.
Yeah, because he won it from Foley. He won it in that triple threat at SummerSlam. Then he lost it
the
to
night
Vince.
After. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Because Foley wins it. Yeah. So he beats him on Raw. Then he which is like such an like Shawn Michaels gets like the boyhood dream, and Triple H is like, I'm gonna win with the help of Shane McMahon on the Raw after SummerSlam. Then he loses it to Vince like 2 weeks later, like 3 weeks later. Then he wins it like a week and a half later at Unforgiven. Then he keeps that until Survivor Series, which is like, I mean, I guess it's like 2 months or something. And then he gets it back in like on a Raw in January. Triple H, the king of winning the title on Raw. And then he holds that until Backlash, which was a decent reign, but it was like just feuding with Foley and The Rock. Mm-hmm. And then, and then he wins it back for like a month later. Yeah, it's like they fucking love doing that. I will say this though, like when people hotshot titles now, WWE doesn't do it a ton, but they sometimes do it. But I'm like, just do it on Raw. Like the whole point of hotshotting a title is like, whoa, at least get something out of it. At least do it on Raw, and then you're like, oh man, I missed a title change. Like I don't want to do that. But they're just like, they'll do it just on pay-per-views.
Yeah. Well, when you don't see it coming, that's the time to do it. And they think that, well, they're watching the pay-per-view, so let's just shock them in the middle of the show for no reason.
Yeah, right. All right, so we had Ivelisse and Thunder Rosa. I thought this was one of the best women's matches that they've had on Dynamite. Ivelisse and apparently Thunder Rosa were legitimately punching each other in the face in this match, which may have influenced why I liked it. But
I heard that too, and now I want to go back and watch it just to see if I can tell where it happened.
Yeah, I was just like, this match is pretty good, and then it's like they were really hitting each other, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. We also had 1 second here. We also had Miro back with Kip Sabian. Like, how long until Miro just trucks Kip Sabian?
Oh, man. I got to tell you, the last week's segment where they debuted Miro, I was a little like, that's different from what I expected. Let's see where they go. Something about him backstage bench pressing while talking to somebody, that was so much cooler to me than
I agree.
What it was like last week. There's something about that I really liked.
Yeah. And then we had what I thought was an awesome segment. We had Archer come out and basically say, I've got to get 2 partners against Moxley. And he chose Cage and Ricky Starks from Taz's guys. And this is cool because they've shared words in the past, most notably leading up to the Battle Royal. And then Taz is basically like, hey, when you win it, you give Cage the first shot. And Archer's like, yeah, whatever, fine. And then, Moxley comes out, is jumped by Cage and Starks, which was cool. I saw Ricky Starks, but I thought it was still pretty cool. And then fucking Will Hobbs comes out, like pancakes a dude. And then we find out that Darby Allin will be the third partner. I'm like, oh man, this is like, I got like so hyped for that in like 3 seconds. And Will Hobbs, who's been on the show twice, got me like fucking pumping my fists. And I'm like, like we've been conditioned for like years, 20 years of Vince being like, it's too hard to make a star. It's too hard. It's like, like people reject him. And then like AEW's like, hey, here's this guy, Will Hobbs. And they have like 2 appearances for him. And now they're like, hey, guess what? You care about him. And I'm like, fuck, it is easy. Vince is just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, Will Hobbs, this is a guy that came in, as far as I know, with no like indie cred or hype or anything. And when they put him in the Battle Royal, I was like, oh, they must have just needed to fill a spot or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know who this guy is. And I think he'd worked a couple matches on Dark and didn't really do much. But he had an impressive showing in the Battle Royal. And when he came out here, I was like, oh my God, who is this Haas? Where's he been all my life?
Yeah.
I want more of this guy.
No, and Moxley got him over. Like, Moxley is like, dude hits it out of the park. I mean, like, AEW's champions, as far as like, they're like reverse Carmelo Anthony's. Like, they make everyone around them better. Like, you look at Jericho and like he was making stars like Darby Allin and stuff like every week when he was wrestling. And Moxley now is like, he gives credence to Will Hobbs. And I'm like, that save was cool. Like, this is dope. I'm like excited to see this. It's a 6-man. It's a 6-man that's been built up for like a week. And I'm like, I'm excited to see this. And this is basic wrestling 101. Like, AEW isn't like doing some avant-garde shit here. They're not doing like grindhouse lucha underground that you're like, I've never seen this before. This is fucking basic pro wrestling. And it works because pro wrestling worked for a really long time before the Attitude Era. And now what you're seeing with Vince is this residual Attitude Era effect that's been there since 2000, since 99. And it's biting them in the ass. You go into AEW every week and you're like, oh shit, here are the matches, here are the segments. I know all the stuff. They've probably been built up for 1 week at least, if not more, like with the Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz. And you go in, you know what to expect, and then you get stuff, you get what you pay for. I mean, I know it's free TV, but you get the matches you expect, and then they build up other matches for next week. And that was always the way pro wrestling went. They're like, we'll give you something, but then we tease you something for next week. And that like totally works. What Vince's operation does is you go there and generally have you'll have advertised names, but you have no idea what's going to be on the show. You don't know the matches. You maybe will know some appearances. And then people come out on the ramp at the beginning of the show and something will happen, and then we set up a match for later. Now, Vince McMahon will tell you, I don't need wrestling for wrestling's sake. I need a story. But the problem is, you don't need to tell the story at the beginning of the show you're on. You can start telling that story earlier and progress it and pay it off at your next show. But like the idea that like AEW is doing wrestling for wrestling's sake is idiotic. Like, they're not doing wrestling for wrestling's sake. They're just not having show opening promos and like show angles that you've done since the Attitude Era. This is the direct response to like that one Attitude Era show in like May of '99 where Vince is like, oh, here's a match. You're going to have Ken Shamrock and whoever in a straitjacket match, and they just made all these matches at the beginning of the show, and it popped a huge rating. So they're like, let's just do that forever, and like it doesn't work anymore. First of all, it like doesn't give people a chance to savor or like process anything. It happens too quickly, and second of all, it doesn't make any sense in your fictional universe. So people just fucking show up to your wrestling show and they don't have matches or things to do. Like Seth Rollins is like, I'm going to come to the show. I'm not in any matches, but I'm going to wander out to the ring and I'm going to randomly talk. And then I hope someone wants to fight me because I got nothing to do tonight. That's like so fucking stupid. Like, at least I can believe in AEW that people are like, well, you're paid to be here and you have to fight this guy. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, like it's just so moronic how WWE runs their their process compared to AEW.
And actually, I'll give an example of when WWE in recent years where they did it right. And I can't believe they didn't start doing more of this because the ratings was the proof in the pudding. When they did that Big Show Braun Strowman steel cage match, they built that up for a while. It wasn't just like, oh, we're going to set it up at the top of the show and we're just lucky that Big Show and Braun Strowman just happened to be in the same building here. We'll just set up a cage match for later. No, they promoted it and it popped a rating and the match came off well. So it was successful all around. And I thought, okay, maybe this will be the time that they start moving away from the Attitude Era stuff and going into the more traditional wrestling, how it used to be done stuff. And that didn't really happen.
And I don't mean to sound like old fashioned when I say this is how it used to be done. I'm just like, I don't see what the benefit is for anyone. Like, I mean, if you want to keep like dropping 25% every year, like fine, but it doesn't seem to be working. And like, I mean, I can go on and on about the things I hate about it, like the invisible cameras, the 50-50 booking, the match setups we just talked about, the corporate lingo. Like, there's so much there that happen to exist, and like people think it's the only thing that succeeds, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on here. We talked about the main event, so that was the show. I thought it was good. I guess I don't want to spoil NXT for you, but it's an NXT show. I do want to point out this though, like, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, you guys hate NXT. I'm like, I don't hate NXT. I watched NXT from like 2013 to I guess right, when Dynamite started religiously. But two things. Number one, it's a vehicle that's deliberately designed to hurt any competition. And as a pro wrestling fan, I can't support that. And two, NXT is incredibly different from how NXT used to be. NXT used to be like mid-90s Raw. And I don't say that as like an insult. I say that as a positive. NXT's show wasn't like the greatest show ever. It wasn't ever like, man, you got to watch this episode of NXT. It wasn't like that. It was like just mostly squash matches and sometimes good matches like on the top. But it'd be like, oh, like the vaudevillains squash this guy, or you build up your storylines and stuff, and they would build up these feuds slowly week over week, and they wouldn't expose their characters, and they would film it like Raw. They would basically film like 3 or 4 episodes at a time, and then they would all come out, and you'd be like, oh, cool, this one's got Tyler Breeze, this one has Tyson Kidd, this one has Sami Zayn on it, like, cool. And then you get to the takeovers, and the takeovers would be amazing because it would be like 8 weeks worth of like percolating storylines blowing off in these killer matches. And what it is now is like this 2-hour show where you see the absolute limitations because they're hot-shotting almost everything. Like AEW hardly ever hot-shots. Like they just put a mid-card tag team feud in their main event, and it beat NXT because they're like, we're going to keep our bullets in the chamber. Like if NXT was running AEW, they'd be like, well, let's just put Cody and Kenny in the next main event. Come on, we gotta do something. And it's like what WCW used to do, where it's like the summer of '98, and they're like, hey, let's put Sting and Goldberg on Nitro. I'm like, well, holy shit, hold on a fucking second. Maybe Sting and Goldberg should have a goddamn feud and like build that up and like let it like sit for a second. You don't just put your fucking steak down your gullet when you cook it. You let it hang there for a second. You savor it. Don't put Sting and Goldberg on a Nitro nobody gives a shit about. And like they would do, oh my God, They did so many things like that. Like, go back and look at 1998, and like, there's this weird narrative that Eric Bischoff is like, he's like, I had no room to build up new stars. They say that like I wasn't giving new stars a chance. Dude, fuck your new stars. You didn't give your current stars the opportunity. Like, where was the Hogan Nash match in the summer of 98 or the fall of 98 when like the Wolfpack and Hollywood were feuding? Where was like we didn't have a definitive payoff to that Hogan DDP celebrity feud. You could have just done a singles match with them. Like, there's Bret Hart and Hogan. Like, there were so many matches that they had, and they either burned through them for no reason, like in short periods of time. Like, Goldberg and the Giant could have been a huge deal in that Road Wild thing, but instead they're like, hey, let's put everybody into a battle royal for no reason, and then Goldberg beats 18 guys. I'm like, why did you just do that there? Why don't you have Goldberg work some pay-per-views, like the next one that he's not on, and like, I don't know, just have some fucking matches with him? Like, it was so weird. And like, I'm watching these old Nitros, and it's like, dude, you've got like 18 guys who, like, if you just shuffle them in with Hogan, Nash, and Goldberg and Sting, you've got like, you see Jericho, Booker T, Eddie. I mean, Goldberg was one that actually did come up, but like, you see all these guys and you're like, man, like, Booker T's ready to be a star. Jericho's ready to be a star. Yep. Obviously, these guys did become stars, but it's just like, it's so obvious. Like, I'm watching these things, I'm like, how are they not noticing this? Like, it's mind numbing, some of that stuff. But NXT like did similar things, like Keith Lee and Adam Cole. Like, did that match really need to happen? Did it need to happen then? Did it need to be title versus title? Because, like, the fact is, Keith Lee was like, I want to have both titles and defend them. And then he beat Adam Cole, and he's like, well, I'm going to give up the North American title now. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, and some of it's bad luck. I know, like, Ciampa gets injured, and Gargano gets injured, and Cross gets injured. And, like, you have injuries, but you're also, like, just throwing shit around, and you're like, you're gonna burn through this stuff. And that's WWE has had that problem for years. It's not as bad anymore because they have 9 million wrestlers contracted, but like, AEW, like, they've got so many matches in the tank. Like, they've got Omega and Page, they got Cody and Omega, they got like Cody and Jericho again, they got like MJF and Wardlow. They got so many things going, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just booking 101. And I'm not like a booking genius or anything, but it's just like very obvious to me,
It makes the most sense to me to, less is more is typically the better approach, because that, again, we keep going back to it, and the Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars period was great, but when you get into that hot-shotting, crash TV style, eventually you're going to burn out, and chances are you're going to burn out pretty quickly. I mean, how long did the success of the Attitude Era really last? Like, it peaked in 2001 with like WrestleMania 17 probably, and then after that it's just been downhill ever since. And they, it is what it is right now. So I don't know. I think AEW's approach is better for long-term growth, because you're giving people something to look forward to and not like just burn through everything as quickly as they do. And in regards to NXT, it's almost sad to see what it's turned into. Not that the show's bad. I'm not saying that the show's bad. It's just that I like the simplicity of what it used to be, where it was like you said, mid-90s Raw, or when I was a kid watching Saturday Morning Superstars, or even back to 70s wrestling, like a lot of those shows that were used to just hype up the MSG events and the Shea Stadium events and stuff like that. It's just very simple angles, promos, squash matches, and then put all the building blocks in place to get to those bigger shows. And that was a formula that worked really, really well for NXT initially. And now, even though it might not have the stupidity of what you typically see on Raw, it has like a lot of those formatting issues where they burn through everything so quickly, so nothing feels like it means as much as it should. Like that 4-way Iron Man match they did, which was kind of ridiculous, but I feel like that should have felt like a big deal, even with the draw finish. But the way it came off, it just felt like it felt like a cheap ratings ploy, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I mean, let me put it to you this way, and like, I don't mean to like I don't mean to trash the Star Wars prequels. I know a lot of people do, and like, I appreciate them.
I think they've been forgiven because now people are hating on the sequels, so it feels like people have softened up on the prequels.
All right, well, good. But my point stands regardless. Like, what's a cooler like lightsaber fight? Is it like Darth Maul against Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, where there's like 90 flips and like there's a double-sided lightsaber and people get cut in half, or is it like Luke and Vader from Empire, like, which is a lot less shit happens, but the shit that does happen means more and has been built up longer, So it's kind of like that. I think that's a good comparison between what we're talking about here.
Well, even Obi-Wan and Vader from Episode 4, as simple as it is, it's just two old guys tapping swords, but it's like, all right, at least I care about Obi-Wan, and Vader, he wins. He wins essentially a squash match. So it's like,
I will say that fight is basically like a Hogan versus like Killer Khan match, where like the work rate is so bad that it overrides the character work.
That's an interesting comparison. At least the right guy went over.
Yeah, that's true. Fair. Yeah, Vince would never have the heel go over. He's like, we got to send the fans home happy. But we're blowing up the Death Star. No. Obi-Wan needs to go over. Okay, but let's move on to WWE. Daniel Cormier, former UFC fighter, was quoted had an interview with Sports Illustrated where he talked about that he is in very, very early negotiations with WWE. And at first you're like, wow, is he going to fight? Is he going to wrestle? Apparently he's talking about being a commentator and then like a special attraction, whatever. But I was thinking about this because I'm just thinking about WWE's success or lack thereof with UFC fighters. I mean, when you think about it, Brock and Ronda are the two big ones that like really hit really well. And I think Brock's amazing. Like he's a great worker. Ronda, like, for all of her faults, I think has a natural gift for pro wrestling. She gets how to make matches feel important. And she was a huge star. But then you go to guys like Dan Severn, and I mean Ken Shamrock was very good too. But you go to Cain Velasquez very recently, and it's like it is a different skill set. I mean, the idea of doing this Enochiism, as it would be, is like, okay, we take these guys from the UFC and they've already got tough men cred, so they come in and they're like believable. But like, you look at like Jessamyn Duke and you look at Cain Velasquez, and that's not necessarily the case. Like, there is a skill set. I mean, I remember when Cain Velasquez came down and started beating up Brock Lesnar, and I said, I'm like, I have literally seen Cain Velasquez beat the shit out of Brock Lesnar in a real fight, and I'm watching him beat up Brock Lesnar in WWE, and I do not believe it could happen. and that to me is the difference between the skill set of pro wrestling and MMA right there.
And, MMA is very hard and everything, but at the end of the day, when you're in that world, all you have to do is win fights. And you kind of, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a big box office draw like Ronda was, or like Conor McGregor or anything like that, but you're going to be a pretty big name if you just win a bunch of fights, and you get your credibility by winning fights. When you go into the world of wrestling, there's a theatrical entertainment aspect to it, so you have to have a natural charisma, and if you don't have that, it ain't going to work out. And that's
and people have to believe. They have to believe you. And like, you look at Cain Velasquez, and I didn't see his AAA stuff with Cody, but I saw his WWE stuff, and you look at him, and he's not in great shape. I mean, or at least he's not in great cosmetic shape, and it looks like phony, and it doesn't look good, and it's like, it's like, you may have been a real fighter, and you may have been a real good fighter, but like, it's not translating to like this stage fighting that WWE does. And I don't mean that stage fighting is like a knock. I'm just saying it's a skill set, and like, certain people have it and certain people don't. and like very few, like Brock and Ronda, and to a lesser degree Ken Shamrock, can go in there and be a star and make it work.
And I'm glad you mentioned Ken Shamrock, because if you compare him to Dan Severn, in the UFC, like, I don't know how people feel about this. I wasn't watching UFC at that point, but from what I've heard, Dan Severn would have been considered the better fighter of the two generally. But if you look at them in WWE, and it's like, how is that a thing? Because Shamrock looks like a psychopath that could rip your head off, and Severn looks like my dad.
Yeah.
It looks like Ned Flanders worked out,
He does.
Yeah.
Feels like I'm fighting knowing it all. Stupid sexy Severn. No. So I think that's been it's been an interesting transition. So we'll see how that goes with Cormier.
Wish him the best of luck.
Yeah. So let's go to Raw. And Patrick, I wanted to get your thoughts, because we there's been two major pieces of Raw creative that have happened recently that we haven't commented on. I think people would like to hear us comment on. The first of which is the stable Retribution, and the second I want to talk about will be Raw Underground. But let's start with Retribution first, Patrick. What are your thoughts overall on the stable, on the presentation? Like, how do you feel about it?
Well, it started off interesting, because whenever you have like a mystery man type of aspect to it, it's like, all right, that'll generate some interest, and you kind of want to know who the identity of these people are. Kind of reminded me of like Aces and Eights a little bit when TNA was doing that, which actually wasn't always horrible. There was some good stuff that was done there. So there was a little bit of a Nexus element to it that was kind of interesting. So it captured my attention. For somebody who wasn't watching SmackDown, when they invaded SmackDown the first time, I was like, whoa, okay, that's something. Let's see how this goes. And unfortunately, WWE got their fingers into it, and they're at this point right now where they're overproducing it with this rebel anarchist group that's trying to destroy the company, has its own promo packages and cuts promos, and apparently they're brand exclusive now.
They're brand exclusive. They're only on Raw, which is, great. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like it's Kevin Nash said a few years ago they shouldn't call it Monday Night Raw. They should call it Monday Night Canned. It's like, you and I talked about this the other day. It's like the Matt Hardy Edge feud. Like, Matt Hardy gets fired because he is because I guess Edge had sex with his girlfriend. I don't know what Matt Hardy did to get fired, but regardless, that's what happened. And then eventually he was getting over. People were chanting for him, so they brought him back. And they did these cool segments at the time where Matt would come out of like Edge would be walking the ring, and Matt would like kick his ass, and then they pull the camera off, and Matt would be like, "I'm going to Ring of Honor" or something like that. It felt really real. The problem happened when they brought back Matt. Instead of continuing to do that, instead of continuing to have this rebel, like, real feel to it, they just had Vince say, "I'm hiring him back." And then it's like, okay, now you've been absorbed by the machine. Like, and it's the same thing with Retribution. It's the same thing with these guys. Like, it doesn't feel real because it's like you're using WWE verbiage. You're using that like corporate speak. You're like, you've got promos. Like, I'm glad you're promoting this terrorist organization on your own show. Like, it's very kind of you. I mean, I guess it's to pay him back for not going on SmackDown, but it's just like, it's like, what? Like, I mean, that was, you watch this thing done right. You go back to the NWO and you see them like, oh, they're beating the shit out of people in the back of the parking lot, and all the wrestlers, heel and face, come out and fight them. And WWE did that aspect, but like, it felt so real. And then like afterwards, the announcers are like stalling for time and like, we had a match, but everyone's like injured, so we're gonna scramble. It felt like a real thing. Whereas WWE's like, well, in this next quarter hour, we've got this scheduled, so it's gonna go exactly as planned. It's just bullshit. It's phony. Like, phony's the best term. And like, I know wrestling's actually staged and choreographed. Well, not choreographed. You know what I mean? I know wrestling's predetermined. But like, phony, it doesn't always have to be phony, and that's what it is with a lot of this stuff. It's like, just like, it doesn't feel believable at all.
Yeah, and it would be so much better if they just I can't believe they didn't get NXT in on it, because it's like, if they invade all three shows completely at random and you don't know when or where they're going to show up, that could make all three shows more interesting. But they seem to be, I don't know, cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Yeah. All right. So next, let's talk about. So Patrick, WWE is a fictional sports league.
Yes.
It exists so people will fight and we'll see who the best is. But WWE, this fictional sports league, has a fictional underground fighting circuit in its fictional fighting sports league. So now that's a thing that somehow makes sense to someone.
Oh my God, I've got so many feelings.
How do you rationalize this?
And here's the thing. I could go with it if there was any kind of a direction, or if there was a title, or if there was an understanding that whoever won in this thing would get a title shot. Whatever. It's just like, all right, it's a different type of match, different rule structure, different everything. They treated it like a separate division. I could probably be on board with it because some of the way it's shot and presented looks different from standard WWE television. It looks interesting. It's eye-catching if you're flipping through the channels. But none of it makes any sense, and it's just random. So how can you get invested in something where there's no direction and every match is meaningless and everything's completely random? I don't.
But why are they fighting so differently? Like, what is it like about where they're fighting that they're like, I'm not going to do all the stuff I would normally do, you know?
Yeah. And again, if that was part of the rule structure, like, the ROH Pure title, which they just recently brought back to ROH, it's understood that those matches for that title are wrestled under pure rules. And so it's different. And if they wanted to do something like that here with this fake Fight Club thing that they're doing, that'd be all right. I'd kind of be on board with it. But, there's, as far as I can tell, there's no different rule structure. There's no title to fight for. Nobody's getting over from it, from what I can tell. It just feels like something that they randomly slapped together and put on the show.
Well, it probably feels like that because that's what they did. There was probably this directive on like Thursday, and they were like, we need something big. We're losing ratings every week. And then everybody had ideas, and this is the one that won. So
I'll say this, for as dumb as it is, and in many ways, because it was a shoot, the Brawl for All is much dumber. At least I knew the rules of the Brawl for All, and at least there was a cash prize at the end. So if you did get invested in it, you had like a destination point to get to keep watching.
Yeah, you knew the Brawl for All was going to end at some point.
Yes. This, I don't even know what... I mean, has Raw Underground, is it going to show up on pay-per-view at any point? Is there...
It hasn't yet, right?
Yeah, not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah. All right, let's get to New Japan. G-1 is starting up when, Patrick?
I believe the first show is Friday.
All right. I have a child, so I can't watch like I did the last 3 years every match. But let's talk about the blocks. We've got...
Well, I have them pulled up right here. We've got Block A. We've got a very stacked lineup. Kota Ibushi, Jeff Cobb, Kazuchika Okada, Tomohiro Ishii, Will Ospreay, who's returning for this, Shingo Takagi, Minoru Suzuki, Taichi, Switchblade Jay White, and Yujiro Takahashi. That is a pretty solid lineup, I would say.
So, yeah, I think with the exception of Taichi and Takahashi, that's a pretty, amazing lineup.
Mm-hmm. And in Block B, we've got the Ace, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Juice Robinson, Hiroki Goto, Toru Yano, who's probably the one I enjoy the most out of that bunch.
Agreed.
Yoshihashi, Tetsuya Naito, who's the new champion. He just recently defeated Evil. Sonata, Zack Sabre Jr., who I love. Glad to have him back. Kenta, and Evil, the former IWGP/Intercontinental Champion, which I don't know how he got that, but that's the thing.
Right. I don't know. Maybe we'll be in 3 years, we'll be like, that was genius now that we think about it, like we do with some of Gato stuff. So I think the obvious stinkers in that are of course, Yoshihashi, because he sucks. I mean, so this one isn't bad. It's just not, the highs aren't as high as Block A. Right?
Yeah, they really front-loaded Block A, where it's because, again, you've got Ibushi, Okada, Suzuki, Ospreay, Jay White, and then you've got the Haas and Jeff Cobb, who I want to see him work with every single one of those guys. I mean, there's Shingo. I mean, he's great.
I hope he has a better year than last year, because last year I was a little disappointed with him.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, last year, let me see. Trying to see how the blocks were set last year. Yeah, last year was Ibushi, Okada, Bad Luck Fale, who's not in it this year. Oh, is he? Because he's probably in like Australia or something, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Evil, Tanahashi, Kenta, Sonata, ZSJ, Osprey, and Archer. I mean, that's a pretty. Block A was pretty great then too. Block B had Jay White, Goto, Moxley, Naito, Cobb, Robinson, Takagi, Taichi, Ishii, and Yano. So actually, the lineup may have been better last year, actually, but they had access to more talent. They had like Moxley and like well, that was the big one, uh, but yeah. So who do you think? Who are your picks to win?
Well, has the champion ever won the G1?
Yes, I think Saito. I'm not sorry, not Saito. Chono did it, I think, at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the champion has won. You
Okay,
think Naito's going to do it?
And Naito might have been my top pick, but again, I don't know what their plan is for Wrestle Kingdom. I guess I'll pick Naito, but I'm looking at Block A, and I could go with, Okada because he's Okada. Ibushi, I think I've told you in the past, he's kind of like the bridesmaid, but never the bride, and maybe one of these days he'll get that big win. So I'm thinking maybe Ibushi, but. Yeah, either way, I'm just glad we're getting the tournament because I honestly didn't think we were getting it this year.
Yeah, I default to Okada, Ibushi, and Sonata. I think possibly like a Sonata Naito thing could be a big deal.
And Sonata, it's weird because I feel like he's way better than Evil. Yet
He
Evil
is. He's
always
so
gets
much
the
better.
pushes. It's crazy to me. It's like, Gato, what do you see in Evil that I'm not seeing? Because I don't understand it.
I don't know. He's not even a true heavyweight. He's like short as shit. Like I have no idea. It's like, yeah. So yes. So I think that's it for today. I think we had a lot of wrestling. But this was good. This is good. Because we're on YouTube, guys, remember to like and subscribe as always. We definitely appreciate it. Comment below, and we'll see you next time. So for myself, Erik Clancy, alongside Patrick Kelley, we are
Signing off.